Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We have Mr. Kazumasa Iwata, the president of the Japan Center for Economic Research. This center was created 50 years ago. The timing is very good. Mr. Iwata comes to the club at a time when a lot of doubts are expressed by our colleagues, among others, about the third arrow of Abenomics. After the publication of the latest GDP data, Japan's economy grew by just 0.3% in the fourth quarter, less than half estimates, despite a massive money creation binge. A Reuters columnist, James Saft, writes this morning that Japan's bold Abenomics are producing splattering results on key consumption and investment measures, potentially undermining its resolve. Most of Japanese people think that Shinzo Abe should realize Abenomics and the third arrow in particular, the structural reforms, instead of visiting Yasukuni. Mr. Kazumasa Iwata is no fortune teller, but he seems to believe that Japan will still be a first-tier nation by 2050, thanks maybe also to Abenomics. Mr. Iwata, as I said, is the president of the Japan Center for Economic Research. He's a former economics professor at Tokyo University. From 1976 to 1979, he was contaminated by the French way of life. He worked at OECD in Paris when Jane Birkin was a great singer. She's still a great singer. He worked at OECD in the Department of Economics and Statistics from 2003 to 2008. Mr. Iwata served as deputy governor of the Bank of Japan. He was considered as a dove. He is a member of the Council of National Strategy and Policy. He is here to tell us how Abenomics will affect Japan in the coming years. Please receive and offer a very warm welcome to our guest, Mr. Iwata. Thank you for coming.
So thank you very much indeed for kind introduction. I'm very much honored to be here to talk to you on the future of Japan and the global economy in the year 2050. I recently visited Paris at the end of January, where I participated in a joint seminar organized by OECD Secretariat and also the S3 Cabinet Office, Economic Social Institute, Research Institute of Cabinet Office. This is a joint workshop on the OECD 100 project. This OECD established from OEC in the year 1961. And for the 50th anniversary, they have embarked on projection on long-term forecast of OECD countries at 2060. 50 years anniversary plus after 50 years world economy. Therefore, they name this project as OECD 100. And the OECD prepared this workshop together with the S3 of Cabinet Office. And coincidentally, our center, as already mentioned, the moderator, our center established in 1963, about just 50 years ago. And to commemorate this 50th anniversary, we had 3 projects. One of them is this Japan and the global economy in the year 2050. Therefore, we have published this outcome and then invited as a keynote speaker at this joint workshop at the OECD. I enjoyed very much on this workshop, and today I would like to talk about this Japan in 2050. And start with this talk. Just we have the joint project with CSIS, this so-called virtual think tank between Nikkei and the JCER and the CSIS. And we had the annual meeting of CSIS in autumn 2012. We are in preparing this 2050 projects. And so at this place of annual meeting, they both Mr. Armitage, he's a specialist on the security issues in the United States and Asian security issues. And also Professor Nai at Harvard University, he's also the expert authority of this security issues in global and also Asian area. And the two of them asked us whether Japan will remain as one of the first-tier nations over the coming decades. I find that this is a rather serious question because implicitly that question, implicitly assumes Japan is now almost falling out from these first-tier nations and to becoming more and more secondary and third-tier country. And so I find that this is the very important issue posed by these two experts on the security issues. On the political issues, on the security issues, Professor Kitaoka is in charge of this virtual think tank project, and I am responsible for the economic issues. And therefore, I decided it's a good thing to focus on this issue in preparing this long-term forecast of Japan and the global economy. How to Japan can maintain the status of first-tier nations in the coming decades, and notably in the year 2050. This is the starting point of our long-term projection. Of course, the question of this Japan will remain, will Japan remain as one of the first-tier nations? To this question, my answer is surely yes, but how to achieve it? Today, my talk is just, present my view, how to achieve it. In my view, the first-tier nations should achieve the aim to enrich the people's national life. This is the first thing, to do. But this is not sufficient. Japan should make a positive contribution to provision of global and local public goods in the areas of global warming and also the security issues and the maintenance of stable world currency system. At the same time, free trade and investment system. Those areas Japan should make positive contribution. So this is the introduction of my talk today. And then move on to this long-term perspective and the renewal strategy. This is a kind of third arrow of Abenomics. Professor Hamada just mentioned monetary policy, monetary expansion is A, fiscal expansion B, but growth strategy is E rank he marked, but I think a lot of things to do now, Japanese government, to develop the really new strategy on growth. And it's a conventional way to make long-term forecast based on the neoclassical growth model, where the neoclassical growth model assumes growth rate determined by three major factors. First is labor input, second is capital input, and the third is total factor productivity or multi-factor productivity. This is the efficiency, degree of efficiency of the entire economy. Now, there are three factors. But currently, Japanese labor input, because of the declining population tendency in the latter half of 1990s, we have the negative rate of growth, labor input. In addition, capital input, also net capital accumulation. This is subtracting the depreciation of existing capital stock. Also records negative rate of change. So Abenomics, now growth strategy, aims at achieving 2% growth rate, at the same time achieving the 2% inflation target. The 2%, how to create it? both capital input and labor input negative. Only we are obliged to rely on this increase of efficiency of entire economy. This is the total factor productivity increase. So OECD and other long-term forecasts based on this neoclassical growth model, and assuming there is a tendency of the various countries to have convergence of per capita GDP in the developing process, under the implicit assumption that all technology is available for all countries. That implies technology is a kind of public goods available to all countries. And therefore, if that technology is the same, then the emerging economy can catch up with the advanced economy at some point of time. That implies convergence of per capita income of all the world. And this is the hypothesis. And there are a number of empirical studies whether really convergence occurs or not. In our forecast, we rely on this neoclassical growth model, but with one important difference from the conventional neoclassical growth model. That is the level of total factor productivity, is affected by the difference in quality of various institutions, not only economic, but also social and political institutions. This affects the difference of quality in various institutions. That affects the difference of total factor productivity level. Neoclassical growth model usually centers on this rate of change of total factor productivity, but our case is level difference of total factor productivity is affected by the difference in social, political, and economic institutions. And we actually observe in the emerging economy or developing countries, the development process is not straightforward. Some countries falling in so-called poverty trap in the process development, or the middle income trap. This is one of the most challenging issues for the Asian economies now, and notably in the case of China. And so our approach is focusing on this difference of quality, various institutions, and collecting various data, which covers business practice and political system, democratic process, about the development process of the due process decision making and others. We collected various data and categorized into five groups of these various indicators, which shows the quality of various institutions. So there are a number of studies already done based on this, along this line. For instance, Hall and Jones, and then Acemoglu and Robinson, and others. Acemoglu, Robinson wrote an interesting book, a thick one, and Why Nation Fails. So we have identified 5 categories of institutions. First one is political system stability. Second one is openness of economy. Third one is gender gap. Fourth one is easiness of startup business. Fifth is flexible labor market. So I find in the current Abenomics growth strategy, I find the 100-page policy menus, prepared by various ministries in Japan. But unfortunately, there is no link between these various policy measures and the level of total factor productivity. Which policy measure affect in what way, the level of total factor productivity? We have employed this new approach, to have the link by employing evaluation function of institutions, which quality difference of institutions affect, to what extent the level difference of total factor productivity. So, and I think this is our new approach, different from OECD. So, as I said already, Japan currently have labor force growth negative and net capital accumulation growth is also negative. We should rely on this improvement of quality of institutions. That implies Japan should aim at achieving the best practice in the world, notably in the area of women's participation in labor market and the new entry of domestic and foreign firms into regulated markets, as well as education, notably the role of university and college in the process of new venture business. So we employ the analysis evaluation function and provide assessment. This difference of institutions, how affect the level difference of total factor productivity. I think Abenomics has some success already with respect to the first arrow. This is the 2% price target now. QQE, quantitative and qualitative easing policy under new governor, Mr. Kuroda. Now we have some progress on the inflation rate, 1.3% now. And the second arrows, this is a fiscal stimulus. The first one, the second one. I recall, Mr. Keynes wrote a letter in the year 1933, December, at the end of the year. He wrote an open letter to President Roosevelt, and he argued 3 points, U.S. should do. First one is cheap money. This is expansionary monetary policy, engaging in a massive purchase of government bond in order to lower the long-term interest rate. This is just corresponding to BOJ's, QQE. The second one is wise spending. He employed this word. This is the temporary increase of government expenditure. And I think this corresponds to the second arrow. Japan already compiled the supplementary budget. First one and the second one. To prepare for the consumption tax rate hike scheduled in April, 5.5 trillion yen. Second supplementary budget already prepared. And engaged in the third arrow, and maybe the cabinet will announce the new growth strategy in June. I think what is lacking in this current growth strategy is the missing link between the various policy measures and the level of total factor productivity I mentioned. And I think on this growth strategy, what is most important thing is the opening up of our society and the economy. We should globalize and more. So I think it's a good thing Prime Minister Abe, at early stage, he announced Japan will join the negotiation process of TPP. And I think this is crucially important for Japan, to achieve the successful growth strategy. Because in my view, Japan is located at the center of mega regionalism. Japan not only already related to this TPP and involved also Japan EU and also the RCEP, this with Asian economies, and maybe over the future APEC level free trade and investment. This is, I think, our center from the old days, nurtured this development of APEC as a kind of finally a community. But in this process, we need free trade and investment regime in this area. So therefore, I think Japan should play a key role on this mega regionalism, in the world economy. At the same time, this works quite positively to achieve the successful outcome of growth strategy of Abenomics. For instance, Doha round in early December there had been only partial agreement, not the full success, but I find the important thing is trade facilitation. There had been some agreement, and also development issue, some agreement, and partly in agriculture, some agreement. And I think most important thing is this removal of barriers against global value chains. This is very important for the growth of Japan, also the Asian economies. I find the post-war development of Japan and the Asian countries based on this extensive development of global value chain network. I think if the barriers against this global value chains removed entirely all over the world, according to the assessment by the World Economic Forum, recently appeared and in a paper, they argued if all the barriers removed against the global value chains, the world benefit, economic benefit amounts to $2.6 trillion. But if we remove all the tariffs, all over the world, that the benefit is only $0.4 trillion. A 6 times larger benefit will bring with it, if we succeed to remove all the barriers against the global value chain. Therefore, I think openness of our economy is key for success of renewal strategy. And I will show you the difference between the base case scenario and the growth scenario. We have presented 3 scenarios over the future of Japan. First one is the base scenario, where we assumed, we carry out the reform in the same speed as in the past 10 or 20 years. And then progress would not remarkable. And the second scenario is this growth or reform scenario. We accelerate our process of these reforms very strongly. And third scenario is the fiscal bankruptcy scenario. In the growth reform scenario, I name this Japan is back scenario. The Prime Minister Abe expressed when visited the United States. And in this scenario, it's possible for Japan to achieve $90,000 of per capita GNI 2050 from the current $42,000 in 2010. This is more than double the level of per capita gross national income. This is very important to enrich the people's life, in Japan. This is the first requisite for Japan, remain as the first-tier nation. In the base stagnation scenario, Japan implements just reform as in the past, and then Japan will fail to improve the real consumption of household. In this scenario, our growth rate from today to until 2050, average growth rate only very close to 0%. The growth scenario, 1.3% on average. This is 1.3% is coincidentally, the OECD 2060 scenario also, provide the number, same number, 1.3% from today to 2060. And the third scenario is the risk of, fiscal bankruptcy. And if Japan hesitate to carry out the reform and also delay to raise consumption tax rate to 25%, in order to avoid this fiscal bankruptcy scenario, we argued in our forecast, it's necessary to raise consumption tax rate from currently 5% and to 25% in the early 1930s. And in addition, we should cut the corporate tax rate from 38% to 25%. This is the same 25% for corporate tax rate and the consumption tax rate. We need fundamental tax reform. And if we do that, then we can have the stabilized debt, government debt GDP ratio currently more than 200%, 230%, something like that. And if we do these reforms, and then it's possible to maintain our government debt nominal GDP ratio at 200%, still high, but stabilized. Also, one of the implications of exercise is only in the case of a growth reform scenario, we can secure the positive rate of growth of real consumption by household sector in Japan. Other base case scenario, 0% real GDP growth rate and the increasing public burden from 37% to about 55%. Real consumption per capita, rate of growth, negative. And this has implication for the argument provided recently by Lawrence Summers. Summers argues advanced economy faces the risk of long stagnation. He mentioned there is a risk of negative natural interest rate. Natural interest rate is in the framework of neoclassical growth model. This is the equilibrium real interest rate. Equilibrium interest rate and market real interest rate, the difference creates deflationary or inflationary pressure. According to the big cell theory, this is about 100 years ago, Norwegian famous economist argued if the natural rate is higher than market real rate, then inflationary pressure will appear. If the opposite happens, then deflation will persist. Therefore, I think when Mr. Summers raised this issue, possibility of negative natural rate implies significant negative per capita consumption growth rate over the future. I find the United States could avoid this issue, but I find in the base case scenario of Japan, there is a possibility of negative per capita consumption growth rate, and so still we have persistent deflation risk over the longer run. So this is one of the implications. And another, recommendation in our long-term forecast is to stop the declining tendency of our population. If we have continue the fertility rate, total fertility rate 1.41, and over the future, and then the size of population diminishing. After 800 years, last baby will be born in Japan. The size of population becoming smaller and smaller, and the proportion of working age population becoming smaller and smaller. And I find that basically, speaking, it's almost impossible to sustain the social security system, given this long-term trend, diminishing number of working age population and total population is declining. Therefore, we recommend that we should maintain the size of population at certain level. How to stop it? And we made recommendation stop the declining tendency of population at 90 million. Today we have 123 something like that million, but we should maintain this size of population. How to achieve it? There are two ways. One of them is to raise our total fertility rate. Today we have 1.41, but we have carried out empirical study and detected the evidence. If Japan makes effort, as French government made in the post-war era, France achieved about 2 fertility rate now about 2, and they have succeeded to raising this fertility rate. If we import almost all the measures, for the child care expense, that total amount would be about 7-8 trillion yen. But if we carry out the policy measures which are adopted by French government today, then it's throughout possible to raise our total factor productivity from 1.4 to 1.8. Still, falls short of same reproduction rate. This is 2.11. And so another way to maintain this population size is allow more foreign workers in Japan. We made the recommendation. Today we have the 50,000 foreign workers every year, inflow of net foreign workers in Japan. But it's a good thing to increase at 200,000 in the year 2050. If we do these policy measures, then it's possible to maintain our population size, maintain at 90 million. So these are the three scenarios of Japan. And how about the global economy? We have three findings of our exercise. First one is in the year 2050, the United States will remain as an economic hegemon, maintain the status of the largest economy in the world. The long-term projections provided by international financial institutions, ADBI and Goldman Sachs, others, they provide the picture. China will exceed the size of the United States in the early 2030. And the OECD projections also have this similar outcome. In the early 2030, China would become the largest economy in the world. But according to our analysis, based on this focusing on this difference of quality of institutions, and not only economic, but social, political, China will fall in middle income trap in the coming decades. That implies upper limit of middle income per capita is 12,000. Therefore, according to our forecast, even in the year 2050, China's per capita, GNI remain around that level, and remain at the middle income. And among Asian economies, only Malaysia will succeed to move out from middle income trap. In Asian economies, there is a rising tendency in a recent period, but only Japan and Hong Kong, Singapore, and Korea and Taiwan. These five countries, only these five countries move out from middle income trap. And in our forecast, only Malaysia will rejoin, and others remain in the middle income. Therefore, it's very important for OECD or the advanced economies to provide good advice to Asian economies to facilitate the move out from this middle income trap. So I would show you a number of charts which shows what I have said. This is the chart of so-called T-scores. I have said the 5 broad categories of various institutions: political stability and opening up market, and gender gap, and easiness startup business, and labor market flexibility. In Japan, inner circle, the world average is 50 T-scores, and if Japan has the more than 50, then it implies, more than average quality of these 5 categories of institutions. But Japan's problem, you see this dotted line, this lagging behind on the gender, and also the openness, and also the startup business. These 3 categories, Japan, this rather inwards, are located. United States has more balanced, this T-scores, and rather much above the 50, and continue to expand. We assumed in this base case, this just United States continue their reform effort as in the past. Then some expansion again. And the US growth rate would be about 1.7% until the year 2050, and maintain the first, biggest, economic size. On the other hand, if you see the China's T-scores rather poor, notably with respect to this political, system. As long as China maintains extractive political system, not inclusive political system, this should become the major constraint on the development and growth in China. And if China makes similar effort as in the past, some improvement, but far below the average of advanced economies. And so this resulted in the outcome that China, even in the year 2050, remain in the middle income class. The table 1 shows how about the per capita gross national income in the year 2050. Starting point of Japan is 2010. As I said, $42,000. This is 2010 per capita GNI. Korea now won't achieve within 3 years this 40,000 per capita GNI. They have national goal now. Japan, we have 42. Over the future, we have 3 scenarios, I said. The highest one is this Japan is back scenario. We have about this $90,000. This is ranking is also important. Japan ranked 3rd. And the starting point, if you look at the back in the history in the year 1990, when the bubble busted on the equity market. At that time, Japan's per capita GNI, second highest, just after Switzerland. And ranked 2nd, but afterwards long stagnation, and our ranking down, and then 16. But if we succeed, this in the growth strategy, then we come back to the status of the 3rd rank, per capita GNI. In the standard scenario, maybe some improvement of this per capita GNI, 56, and but not so much. And the real GDP growth rate is about 0, and the real consumption growth rate would be negative. And there is a persistent risk of stagnation and the deflation. And the bankruptcy scenario is implies, of course, much below, lower per capita GNI. This is a map of world economic changes from 2010 to 2050. United States, much bigger number compared with China or the India. And one of the indication, Japan's closedness of our economy, this foreign direct investment. Outward is on a horizontal line. The vertical line shows the foreign direct investment in Japan from abroad, divided by nominal GDP. And the red line shows Japan's case. Foreign direct investment, Japanese firms abroad, somewhat, not so bad, but not so big expansion. But the problem is the foreign direct investment from abroad to Japan. This is so low. This is about 3% of nominal GDP. This number is lower than North Korea, and quite unfortunate outcome so far. And then the figure 4, this is difference between growth scenario and the base case scenario. And this bottom line, this is the base case. Until the year 2030, we have positive rate of growth, but it gradually turned down, this negative rate of growth. As a result, we come back to the original starting point of real GDP, virtually 0 growth in the standard case. If we do the similar effort as in the past, then the future is not so bright. But on the other hand, in the growth scenario, 1.3%, this is based on our evaluation function of various institutions. Which factor affects mostly, this difference between the 2 scenarios? Most important thing is just the shaded area. This is the opening market, our economy and the society. And this accounts for about 70% of the difference. Therefore, very crucial for Japan to engage in this, mega regionalism, FTA. Very crucial. And others important thing is this gender gap, female participation, and others are flexibility of labor market, accounting for the difference. For instance, one case is female work participation, compared to Japan and Holland, Netherlands. Netherlands in the year 1985. Japan's women's participation is higher, much higher than Netherlands in the year 1985, when the bubble started this year. And so But Holland, made serious effort on this reform, this labor market, and then exceeded to the level of Japan's female participation. And in our scenario, base case scenario is just trend-like, increase of women's participation. That's all. We are going to make similar effort as in the past. But in our growth scenario, we assumed we catch up with the level of Holland, Netherlands, participation rate. And at the same time, not only the participation rate, but the status of women in the workplace. This makes a big difference. If you look at this chart, for instance, percentage of women, parliament member, this is Japan's case about 10%. Norway case, this is a 45%. This is a big difference, and we recommend that it's a good thing to have introduced a kind of quota system. Of course, there is a pro and cons. A strict quota system is better or not. But I think a variety of quota system I find, and it's a good thing to introduce firstly on this political area. Then we could have the case of women prime minister soon. Just happened in the case of Korea. And the business area, this managers level, this is a very small proportion, only 10%. In other countries, 40%, 30%. Executive level, Japan's case is women proportion only 1%. Europe and the United States, this is average is more than 10%, or between 10 and 20%. So big difference, and this quality change also needed. And on the birth rate, I have pointed out if Japan, introduce all the measures adopted French government, it's possible to raise our total fertility rate to 1.8. This is one factor. Another factor is increase of immigrants. To 200,000. This is in the year 2050, and gradually increasing from the 50,000, today. And combined these two measures will work to sustain our population level. And what is important, one of the implications of this immigration, if we succeed to maintain the size of population, both immigration and also the total factor fertility rate, total fertility rate, then our public burden initially somewhat raised, but over the longer run, reaching more than 55%, and but now by the year 2100, coming down to 45%. And final point I would like to make is venture investment and the venture capital and the venture business and the innovation. Total factor productivity affected not only by this social and political and economic institutions, but of course technological innovation. This is very important. I think what is lacking in Japan is this the role of university and the college as the source of a new business and invention. So there is a huge difference between Japan and the United States in this respect. Only 1 and 20, the proportion of number of startup. This is a new business, and I think university and college, reform is fundamentally important to stimulate, new innovation. And I think new innovations, recent report by the McKinsey published May last year, they raised 12 disruptive technologies, 12. But among 12, about 10 is very closely related to information communication technology. And I think main promoter of this new technological innovation is coming from university and the colleges. Japan so far relied on the inventions by the big enterprises, But in order to have this new technology, we need, to have more collaboration between big company and university. So having said this, I just conclude my remarks. And so thank you very much for your attention. And I'm very much pleased if you have Q&A. And so,
Thank you very much, Mr. Iwata. Who wants to ask the first question? I think we need a woman. We have to narrow the the gender gap. If the gender gap was narrowed, we would not have that man as governor of Tokyo today. Madam, please, can you come? Yeah,
yes. Yes.
Can you?
I'm Professor Pauline Reich from Waseda University School of Law, and I have been looking at your charts, and I wanted to mention something I just did to our faculty entrance exam on Saturday. I had the examinees analyze a chart from OECD about not just the gender gap in employment in Japan and other OECD countries, but the wage gap. And I think that we see a lot of emphasis on childbearing and childcare, but how do you support the children when your wage is 50% of the male wage? I don't see any vision in the slides, but perhaps you can tell us what kind of linkages and what kinds of visionary activities might improve that aspect for women in Japan?
Yeah, okay. Thank you very much. This is an important issue, and I think not only child care, but also elderly care is a big issue for Japan. And it used to be in Japan, the women do all the three things, part-time work, outside and working for a business, and at the same time, elderly care and child care. And the three jobs at the same time. I find it's almost impossible to do the three things at the same time. And anyway, there is a need of more reasonable, balancing the work and the life, and this is very important. And the way of working by male, not only women, but the men, this is, Japan is working too long time, still, annual labor hours, still maybe not the longest, but very long, similar to Korea. And as long as men working so long time outside, and then they would have no time for elderly care or child care. And there is we need work sharing, and also the sharing of elderly and child care. And so, but this would not be sufficient, they need, we need more government support, to help this child care and elderly care. And I find immigration, usually so far the Japanese government adopted the policy, only skilled workers we accept. This is the basic policy, even today. But I find there may be a need, to open up our economy to these elderly care or the child care, area. And Taiwan has already done, this more opening up this market for foreign workers on the elderly care, And I think when Masuda-san had the speech, and I just hearing his speech, and I raised the question, how do you think about this immigration on the elderly care market? But his answer was rather conservative, and language problem is so serious, and so I do not favor this idea. He said so, but I think there is a need if really women work equivalent work, carry out the equivalent work as male worker, and then need additional help, not only from government, but also from the market, and also even the foreign workers. This is a wage gap issue. Of course, this is mainly due to the fact that the women's mainly working as a part-time worker, and the existing tax and social security system favors the household wife position. If she remains and then without earning a wage, but they can get the a pension benefit. And there is favorable tax treatment for the household wife, and it's a good thing to have the equal treatment and facilitate the women to find up more close to full-time job, not to the part-time job. And I think more basically speaking, the Japanese society should have allow the diversity, and Japan society is rather male-centered society, and women is still a kind of minority. And I think it's basically speaking, it's a very important, to have the equal treatment on the job performance, job size-based wage system or the employment system that implies a more flexible labor market. This is needed, Therefore, not narrowly on the child care, elderly care, but the way of working, a system, employment system and a wage system as a whole, that implies not only economic system, but institutions, but also political and the social institutions must change if we want to really achieve this goal.
My Dutch colleague.
I have one test question and then a real question. One test question is, how many women are at your institute, and what are the working hours at your institute? The second question is the Oranda model about 5 years ago that was all over the newspapers in Japan. And you are comparing the situation of working women with the Netherlands. We have one structural difference, and it's a similar question as the previous person, where structural change would also bring better conditions and more egalitarian conditions for all people in the workforce. That is this so-called Oranda model, as it is called here in Japan, where the security system, which is in place for full-time workers here in Japan, would also be in place for part-time workers. That is, if in the Netherlands you have a part-time job, you pay a part-time participation in social securities. So that would mean that that also in families, everybody could work part-time, which is also more. But my question is, as long as there is no structural change, and the structural change the Abenomics people are talking about do not touch this field at all. So how are you going to change this gender gap, or even not only, it's not a gender matter, because all these Hisei Shain, they have the same problem as these women always had in the working world in Japan. So my question is this structural change ever get a chance if you take the Dutch system as a role model?
Okay, so thank you very much for your information. On the first question, our center, JCER, about 40, we have staff, and about half is women. How about the proportion of manager level? About 10%. And we are now aiming to achieve, 30%, And this is one of the goals set by the LDP, this by the year 2020, 30% of manager, level jobs by women. And I think it's quite possible for our center to achieve this 30% in the coming several years. And my own personal goal is not the 30%, but the 40%. This is comparable to Netherlands. And on the second issue, you raised this social security system, this equal treatment of social security system, both to full-time worker and the part-time worker. I find when I worked for the OECD, 1976-79, I found I had one of the case, very able women working as a consultant to the OECD. She is doing equivalent job as the division head. And therefore, OECD Secretariat made a proposal to her whether you are going to become this full-time worker and assuming the job of division head. But her answer was very clear. I prefer to be part-time consultant job, because of various, other jobs balancing, and also the equal treatment of social security system. Even though she chooses, division head as a full-time worker or consultant worker, the treatment is equal. And I find I was very much surprised, to hear this episode. Europe is doing in that way. And what is important thing is both wage system and the social security system should be equipped to treat equally, regardless of a full-time job or part-time job. And actual step, still very slow. There is argument carried out, at the various committees, under the International Competitiveness Committee, but still the conclusion is, in my view, still far away, to reach this status. But it's a good thing to start with. For instance, this equal treatment on the women with respect to household life and working women. This is quite unfavorable for the working women.
We have 3 questions around here. Fred first, and after, and after. So, please, can you limit to 1 question?
Fred Varco, freelance. Very interesting speech. We now know what needs to be done. My question is how? And I use the example of fertility as one possible. We had a speech here, I think, 10 years ago from somebody called Noguchi, saying these things have to be done, and they're not done. And I think, sorry, I don't want to make a speech, George.
Thank you.
You said Japan is a male-dominated society. I think Japan is ready not to be a male-dominated society, but I don't think the government is ready. So the question is, how do you get the government working to do this?
So I think at the government sector, I also worked for the government sector for 15 years, and sometimes working overnight, preparation for the answers for the parliament member, the Q&A. This is takes long time, and even today, I think many bureaucrats at the government working after midnight, almost every day when the parliament session starts. If this situation continues, almost impossible, to have the better balance of working and life, And we need a fundamental change, The government should, take the initiative, to change this mode of working.
Yes. Please. Yes. You. Yes. Yes.
Anthony Rowley, Singapore Business Times. I must admit, I don't see how Japan can remain a top-tier nation, frankly, because it's poor in resources. It's poor in natural resources, energy especially. It's going to get worse. It's poor in market size. It's poor in the size of its labour force, which is going to get worse. And yet, right on your doorstep, you have an enormous economic hinterland in China, in the Koreas, in Mongolia, the Russian Far East. Don't you think the Japanese political leadership, instead of making enemies of these countries, should be focusing very hard on trying to create a truly single market, European-style single market in East Asia?
Yes, I think, of course, Japanese land is so small, and the potentials of other countries in Asia is so huge, and the market expansion. And what is unfortunate for Japan is because of the declining population, tendency combined with the persistent stagnation after the bubble burst, notably after mid-1990s, suffered both deflation and low growth. And in my talk today is anyway how to reverse this tendency. We have achieved once, this third ranking of per capita GNI in the year 1990. From the start of after the destruction of Second World War, starting quite low per capita GNI, but achieved in the year 1990, the top class per capita income. And why not this time? This is, I think, a economy can achieve better outcome if really, we can succeed to improve our institutions, as we put emphasis today. If Japan really succeeded to equipped with the best practice of various fields, including business and work and balance, and also the technological innovation, this is, and also allow for the more diversity by accepting different cultures and the way of thinking. And I think it's throughout possible, to Japan is come back.
What about creating a common market with them?
Yes, this is also therefore I put emphasis, APEC is a very good scheme for Japan. APEC include not only Asian economy but also United States and this Pacific area as a whole. This is from the start of our center. We made a serious effort, to expand this Pacific area economic integration. Once, for instance, Saburo Okita made a proposal to establish a kind of OECD like. International institution in the Pacific Asia area, and this is not realized yet. But over the future, it's possible, to have more deeper integration. But I think political issues, just compared with the relations between Germany and France, these are the two promoting economies. Which resulted in this European integration and even the monetary integration. But in the case of Asia, it's maybe very, very difficult. China, Japan would be the two leaders, but still political difference is so huge, and territorial issue is now becoming more serious. And so I hope these territorial issues will be, for the short run, postponed and more reasonable. This outcome based on the international law and rule of law. This is very important. But I think anyway, Japan should take initiative. From the start of our center, that already 50 years ago. To establish this integrated Asia, Pacific Asia, area.
We have time maybe for 3 questions. My Dutch colleague, and then Stefano, and then yourself. 1 question, please. We are running out of time.
Daniel Leusink, het Financiële Dagblad, the financial paper from Holland. I've been in Japan since 2007. If Japan will put in place a 2-child policy or even a 3-child policy, toward 2020, the year of the Tokyo Olympics. To what extent can it contribute to stable and sustainable economic growth? Do you have any projections on that?
Okay, yes. Even though we achieve this, this increase of total fertility rate, it takes a long time, to have the stabilized population size. There is a significant time lag. China now changed their one-child policy, and maybe 2 children and so on. And but it takes a long time, even for China, to stop the very sharply declining population tendency. And as early as possible, it's a good thing to implement these policy measures, to promote the, child care and various facilities. And new governor Matsudae just talking about this child care houses and, places. Tokyo metropolitan area must increase the effort and build these child care houses, close to the station, not to the company. And I think he has some ideas, to promote this tendency. Yokohama City Mayor, Mrs. Hayashi, and succeeded to have 0 waiting list of children, for this child care house. I think, therefore, it's possible, to promote this tendency more strongly in the coming years.
Stefano, just, we have no time. Stefano.
Thank you, Sensei. My name is Stefano Carrero of the Italian Economic Daily.
Yeah.
So my question is, if in the last couple of quarters, the Japanese economy, after all this extraordinary monetary stimulus and fairly strong fiscal stimulus, grew only 1% annualized, so don't you think there are some reason to be skeptical that over the medium term and in the future, the Japanese economy will do better when there will be less fiscal stimulus, because the consumption tax will go up to 5 times the current level, and also sooner or later the Bank of Japan would start reining in his loose monetary policy. This is the question. It's difficult also for me to understand. Thanks.
Yes, thank you very much. Yes, this is a very important issue, and I find the 1% annualized rate of growth somewhat disappointing. But the major factors of this outcome is coming from the fact that the external demand, net external demand, contribute negatively, subtracting the growth by 0.5%. This is rather significant because of the sharp increase of real imports. Because we have increase of consumption and investment, and then also the supplementary budget increase public investment, and that implies increase of real imports. But the problem is on export side. This expansionary monetary policy brought about the big change of exchange rate, about 20 and 25% depreciation compared with the period before Abenomics started. And so everybody expected our real export will recover very strongly, of course with some time lag. I myself thought maybe summer last year the effect would appear, but the effect is so small. Some increase but not significant. One reason is, of course, emerging economies not solid enough, this recovery process. The ASEAN countries and also political administration is more fragile, and the United States some growth, but compared with the previous recovery cycle, they record usually 4 or 5% growth rate, but this time only 2%. But still, U.S. is the leading country of this recovery process. Therefore, global growth is not so strong, just on average growth rate of world economy. And this is one fact why our real export is slow to increase. Another factor is this is more serious in the international competitiveness of Japanese industry, becoming weaker, and also the shift of overseas production. For instance, if we take automobile, we have 60% production of car by Japanese firms now are made in abroad. Only 40% produced in Japan. There is a shift of production place, and also the international competitiveness. Gradually, very after mid-1990, at that time, our share of the export market, 12%, but today we have only 6%. Compared with Germany about 10% and maintain the same share. There is an erosion of this export market share by Japanese industry. This long-time trend of this international competitiveness. This is one of another cause of this, erosion of this international competitiveness by Japanese industry, notably the electrical machinery and semiconductor, and those areas now catching up countries like Korea, Taiwan, and China. That's they are producing more high quality and also cheap price products, and so Japanese industry faces this problem. Of course, another cause of the sharp increase real export is energy. We have, after the Fukushima accident, we additional import of fossil fuel about 3 trillion yen. Total fossil fuel import of Japan is 25 trillion yen. If there is a further depreciation, for instance, this is 10% depreciation. That implies 2.5 trillion yen additional tax, imposed by oil-producing countries on Japan. We have the schedule to raise our consumption tax rate from 5 to 8%. This is 8 trillion yen additional tax burden for a Japanese household. So, therefore, I think myself, this external demand or the sector plays a significant role, even in the context of this consumption tax rate hike. And I find one risk of Japanese economy is a lower real demand, higher prices. This is both a higher energy price and also the consumption tax rate hike. So, but anyway, this is what we need is more from long-term perspective. We should have choice of adequate energy path over the future, over the longer run. This is a contentious issue. This the Tokyo Metropolitan Governor election. This is a restart of a nuclear power station or not. And so, how about the most optimal, this proportion of various energy sources? This is another challenge for us. But we have lost already 30% of electricity supply after the Fukushima accident. We relied 30% of electricity on nuclear power plant. We lost 30%, but we managed so far. But the import cost, import bill cost rising at the same time. So therefore, we have a trade balance deficit. And even the current account turns out deficit in consecutively 4 months. This is a big challenge for Japan, whether we can recover the current account surplus again at what time. I myself think it's possible to recover this current account balance, but over the medium term, given the lower saving ratio, our household saving ratio is about only 1% in the fiscal year 2012, maybe currently virtually zero. Over the medium term, becoming negative, this household saving ratio. So this is, I have not mentioned this issue, but only implicitly net capital accumulation rate is negative. To overcome this negative effect, we should increase our total efficiency of our economy.
We are really running out of time. Please, one last question, if you don't mind. And if you can be short in your response also, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. My name is Professor Garside. I teach an international economics program at Waseda. I want to paint a particularly gloomy picture on purpose for your reaction. As you know, Abenomics is based on very essential behavioral assumptions. Consumers are going to rush out and purchase in advance of inflationary prices. The corporate sector is going to borrow from very liquid banks at low rates of interest, and structural change will rebalance the economy. But there's absolutely no guarantee any of this will happen. Structural change is much easier to effect in a growing economy rather than a stagnant economy. Supposing the corporate sector do not find sufficient profitable investment outlets, and supposing the elderly population becomes scared of the size of the fiscal debt and doubtful about the commitment to social security and begin precautionary saving. So there could be an investment and a consumption strike on the part of two crucial elements of the economy. What then the prospects for Japan?
Yes, therefore, in our exercise of long-term forecast, we prepare the fiscal bankruptcy scenario. This is given the widening size of budget deficit, that implies this saving by government sector, and household sector also significant negative saving ratio. Only the corporate sector, Today we see the corporate sector accumulating large size of, these savings. The cash and liquid asset held by corporate sector is more than 200 trillion yen. And I think one of the, about half of this is earned abroad, This is maybe the corporate sector want to use this about 100 trillion yen for the purpose of M&A abroad or the business investment abroad, remaining 100 trillion yen, And currently Japanese government now urging the corporate managers to pay more to the workers, to raise wages, and to make easier for the consumers to pass through this consumption tax rate hike, 3% and 2%, and that's what is the important thing is anyway why business sector maintains such a huge corporate saving. I think basic factor is domestic. Their expectation over the coming decade, Japanese market expand or shrinks. Many Japanese corporate managers think Japanese economy would shrink, mainly due to population decline. And I think this is therefore very basic issue. Policymakers should challenge, face, and therefore we made a proposal. It's absolutely necessary to stop this tendency, and if the decline stopped, and then GNI, if government has a target, long-term target, to double the per capita GNI from today by improving various institutions and carry out reforms, and then the possible, the corporate sector's managers' mind would change, and there is more need to make investment in Japan. Not only domestic company, but also foreign company would be induced. If Japan is an expanding economy, not a shrinking economy. This first thing very important. Another important thing is corporate tax rate. There is a discussion now. Serious discussed. Whether we should reduce our corporate tax rate to 25%. But I think, basically speaking, it's a very important. For both domestic and foreign firms. To increase the investment in Japan, to have the lower a consumption tax rate, because there is a phenomena appearing, so-called corporate inversion. That implies Japan is not the easy place to develop the business, and changing the place of headquarters from Japan to Singapore and Hong Kong or even the Switzerland, and so there is a movement. And one of the factors is high corporate tax rate. So by combining these fundamental tax reform and also this fundamental measure on the population, this I think priority. We should provide first priority to this population issue.
Okay, next meeting is 2050. Abenomics is a work in progress, so I hope everybody will be there in 2050 and we will know who is right, who is wrong. Thank you very much, Professor Iwata, for coming here. And please accept a 1-year honorary membership card. Maybe we can renew it until 250 as a special case. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed.